When you hear these sounds, it can only mean that you have entered the realm of radio's tipping point. Welcome all. And our show today will be a bit of a continuum of what we talked about last week. Get off of the grid. And I would like to start with a story of something that took place, I think it was about 24 years ago. In a previous life, I was asked to escort a number of individuals coming from various Central Asian countries, such as Georgia, Azerbaijan, Kyrgyzstan, and I think I'm missing one, but it doesn't matter, certainly not for the story. And to a certain degree, it was a bit of an out-of-body experience, as these individuals were being confronted with new experiences. Sorry, what I forgot to mention, this took place in the United States. To be more specific, in Tucson, Arizona. So on the one side, I was very fortunate to be able to watch how these groups, how they were dealing with these new experiences. And on the other side, of course, it was a bit of a challenge, but we all got through it okay. And 24 years after the fact, I think about it, and it was truly an interesting experience. Well, in any case, the original program was more or less thrown overboard, as these various groups had different wishes. For example, the Georgians and the Azerbaijanis wanted to play football in the park. So I had to organize a football, referring to soccer, just to be clear. And they went out to the park and played football. And it just so happened that there was a rodeo taking place in Tucson at that time. So I offered the entire group, if they were interested in going to the rodeo, I would organize that for them. And the Kyrgyzis brought out a TV crew, Kyrgyz TV. So we made it to the rodeo, and we were about to go to our seats, and that is very often the case wherever you go. There was one stand selling something, and this particular stand was selling ice cream. So one of the Kyrgyzis asked if he could have ice cream. I said, sure. Well, I was not ready for the onslaught of everybody else within that group that insisted at that point in time that they needed to have ice cream. Of course, I was able to accommodate, but it surprised me a little bit. So there were a couple different things playing up within that situation. One, of course, that the individual felt empowered to ask, because I could have theoretically said no. I wasn't going to, but I could have said no. And then, of course, the reaction of all the others who probably didn't feel empowered to ask. But there was one stronger emotion than that question of empowerment, and that was FOMO. Yes, they didn't want to be left out. With one of the individuals getting ice cream, and they weren't partaking in that pleasure. So I ended up buying ice cream for the entire crew. And I thought that was right indicative of those feelings that we have, especially tied to a fixture on the grid. That fear of missing out is a clear component of our addiction, of our affliction, of our condition. Oscar Wilde made a statement in The Picture of Dorian Gray. Nowadays, people know the price of everything and the value of nothing. Mahatma Gandhi was quoted as saying, "There is enough for everyone's needs, but not for everyone's greed." Now, if we have a system that is tied to the latter of that of what Gandhi said, the greed part, and does not concentrate on the need, then we should not be surprised, falling back to the quote from Oscar Wilde, that the actual value per se becomes secondary. We do not care whether what we are receiving, or very possibly those things that we are quote-unquote desiring actually offers value. And this is all tied to the conundrum that we have as human beings, if given the choice between something to gain and something to lose, regardless of the chances, the chances to actually lose something could be quite minimal. But we have been hotwired to always have the fear of losing in comparison to the interest in actually gaining. And I leave that to you to define for yourself what is the true motivator. I'm going to come up with a couple of examples that might seem to be a bit obtuse, but within the banality of these examples, one can uncover the hidden absurdity of a number of our actions. This is one that I have noticed for a number of years, regardless of the location. That we have individuals who attend events, or when we were still able to attend events, let's put it that way. But these people would attend events solely because they would get free food and, probably even more important, free drink. And so if we can put this situation into context, and you think about the individual who decides to sit through, say, 1.5, 2 hours of various presentations, and depending upon the event per se, it could very well be 90 to 120 minutes of pure marketing. And these individuals would be willing to sit through so much content that was set together for one particular purpose, and that is to sell them something, so that they can grab something to eat and have something to drink. Now, if we were to do the math and realizing the cost of that food and of that drink, that very possibly these individuals valued their time so little, if we were to put a euro figure on it, that the price they paid looking at their time as being labor per hour was more or less between 3 and 4 euros an hour. But you know as well as I do, it has nothing to do with the cost. The cost of the food, the cost of your time. But they felt they were getting something for nothing. And that was truly the motivator. So if we look at this FOMO phenomena, we notice that there are various components that appear to be the driver. Fear that somebody else will get something that you didn't get, as if you ever needed it, whether you would have cared one way or the other, if the situation had been painted any other way, and the complete lack of the individual's interest in how they actually spend their time, because FOMO is much more important. So let's go back to the idea of understanding what the grid is, how it affects us, that we have a free choice, and it proves so difficult. Let's stay with this example of the free food and free drink. We as individuals have the choice in how we spend our time. Now, possibly, if we did not have this option, we could theoretically be in a complete quandary, not knowing how to spend our time. But that, my friends, is the symptom and not the cause. The cause is the detachment, that situation that we've put ourselves in that does not allow ourselves to make a conscious decision as to what is valuable. But there's no mistake that the choice lies with the individual. "50% discount ends today. Be the first on your block. All this for $5.99. Yes, to be fair, we have a history of being hunters and gatherers and have learned that you better cash in now because tomorrow might bring nothing. So that hot wiring that we have goes back to a situation that we have not had for hundreds of years. But yet this reaction, the reaction caused by FOMO, can be directly attributed to the fear of not cashing in today because tomorrow there might be nothing. We asked the question about the poor and the disadvantaged, of why they continuously choose to binge if they have suddenly ended up with some sort of windfall, quote unquote. Could be a very minor amount. of whatever it may be. But they make a very conscious decision to consume it all at once. And those sanctimonious types among us will go ahead and say, yeah, these people, they have no discipline. These people have no desire for self-betterment. These people have consciously chosen their lot. And of course, for all of us who have not been put through that situation, that is the way for us to feel much better about ourselves, much better in the respect that we don't have to go through that. We accept the inequality. And it's our reflex action to bring it always back to the dispositional. Well, these people are born this way, so why should you expect anything else? Not understanding that these attributes that we are talking about, such as self-discipline, self-betterment, are very easy to talk about when the question of survival is not raised daily. But yet we have chosen to put ourselves in the same situation. We do not consider it to be the same because, my gosh, we are much better off. We are enlightened. We are conscious. We are cerebral. But the fear that I just described of the disadvantaged, it's not much different than FOMO. If you take a hard look at it, it's not much different. Because we are at the heart of it, we're talking about the missing out part. Yes, we are. The big difference is for the disadvantaged. They were placed in a situation and we choose freely to remain on the grid. And these concepts to be found within FOMO and the like, they are a huge constraint. Yes, they are. Because it inhibits us of looking at the collective, looking at our society, looking at our our common good and our common interest, knowing full well that we have the capability, we have the overall ability, we have the wherewithal to create that situation where, at least within our immediate vicinity, that we can make a direct impact. But we don't. And to a large extent, it's tied to the side effect that FOMO actually brings us. In previous episodes of the show, we have talked about the concept of the commons, and in fact, the idea of property is, in the grand scheme of things, a recent phenomena. We talked about John Locke. And the idea, if you work at something, then it belongs to you. And within Locke's treatise, he also claimed, if indeed that of what was perceived to be in your possession, if there was a dereliction of duty, then it no longer belongs to you. But as you can see, today we are far removed from these concepts. We do not look at our community as being part of the common good. We look at our community as a collection of individual parcels that are managed by those who might be physically part of the community, or very often not even close to living within our proximity. But there is a tremendous power to be found within the possession of the parcel. So how can that be, and what can we do about it? If we were to take a serious look within our communities, and understanding full well within the concept of regeneration, that if we neglect something, then it dies. Now, that was not one huge piece of enlightenment from my side, but rather that is a law of nature that we all know. But we still continue to allow for that dereliction to take place. So I posed a question to you. If we know how these things work, and we could theoretically do something about it, how come we don't? And it more or less boils down to the so-called value judgment that we make. That we believe that the cost of doing something about it is higher than the actual rewards. The costs are higher than the rewards. So how can that be the case? I think there are probably a number of reasons why. One, we cannot get past this concept of thinking of things in anything other than in a transactional matter. And with that, the grid does a fantastic job of reinforcing that over and over again, because we're working with a number of triggers, FOMO only being one of them, but it's an important one. So we have lost the capability over years to understand that the benefits for the collective in the long run far outweigh the short-term benefits that we as individuals can possibly accrue from whatever decision it may be. So staying with this example, we say, well, I kind of like that, right? And it's my choice if I want to go ahead and let something go to hell. Because that's my right as an individual. And I will hold out as long as I can. As long as you allow me to raise that point. Because the last thing I will do is allow myself to have something taken away from me. i.e., dereliction of duty means that you no longer have that right. Something to gain, something to lose. And our fear of loss has raised its head one more time. How could we possibly decouple the actions between those activities that are performed and the actual reward? Also a component of the grid. I work, therefore I get paid. And the struggle in managing that subsistence becomes the motivator, quote unquote, to ride on this treadmill Whereas if we were able to separate all of these components, what we do, the value it brings, the remuneration, and those rights that we have as citizens within a society, all 4 points, if we were to separate them all, then very possibly we might be in a better situation to understand the danger which is to be found within the grid. Let's face it, we know that there is a complete disconnect between what we do, the value we bring, and the remuneration. Because if there was truly a clear correlation between the three, then there would by nature be much more of an equity within our society. But that's clearly not the case, and we know that. We know that. And so if we were able to let's start with the fourth component, the fourth one that I listed, that being the needs of individuals. If we were able to make sure that everyone in society have those needs taken care of, and I know what some of you are probably thinking, that we have the welfare state, and the welfare state has been responsible for taking out the motivation of a number of individuals, and the last 2 years have been very indicative when it comes to this. And of course, we're not talking about black and white. And I would also argue that I would be lying if I said we didn't find cases of where that takes place. But I do have two comments to that line of thinking. The first one would be, so what? Following the adages of FOMO, so did it take anything away from you? Or are you really afraid of the others getting something that you didn't get? And here again, I believe that FOMO is the motivator. And then there's a second component that I think is very, very important to think of. And I have seen this over and over again. That this so-called largesse is based on certain groups that are expected to suck it up. You're right, suck it up. Those are those individuals within our society that cannot defend themselves. We do not give them the legal framework to be part of our society on an equal footing. And that is exploited every day. A few years ago, I was working as a volunteer at accommodation for the homeless. And it was relegated to EU citizens. Not quite sure why, but it was. And I would say that both those components, those that I listed, were at play within this homeless shelter. So let's start with the negative. The accommodation costs virtually nothing. There was a limit of maximum 30 days. But if you didn't have much, then it was easy enough to stay for your 30 days, go somewhere else for a day or two, and then come back and start the 30-day cycle again, assuming that there was accommodation free. So, yes, I would agree that we didn't always accommodate the most needy. And we created a vehicle for certain individuals to save money so that they can do something else with the cash. And I noticed that there was some resentment among the others, not necessarily those individuals actually staying at the homeless shelter, but rather some of the individuals I was working with who would come in and make the claim that these people are free riders. Thinking that if you were to be giving a job and provided with very low-cost housing and allowed to save your money, and then very often I've noticed that they'd be running a second job because nobody really even noticed what they were doing in the first job. That's no different. But for some strange reason, we do not consider that to be FOMO. Well, maybe some of us will, but I think most of us won't. And again, within the example of the homeless shelter, I would say that those that were using the shelter for cheap accommodation to save their money, they were clearly in the minority. You saw that most of the individuals had no time for great aspirations. They spent most of their time on survival. But let's look at the second point, the exploitation. And this was a true eye-opener for me. You talk to these individuals, and you hear a story that being a resident of this society brings a sense of shame, because these individuals very often are performing work that most of us would never touch. And that alone would be bad enough. But then they are truly exploited. The stories I would hear, that this was coming primarily from the construction industry. That some of them would be registered as full-time employees. So officially, everything's covered. Then they are told, but you know you're only going to get half of this. And I heard the story more than once of individuals who were coerced to accept such employment because the alternative would even be worse. That would be no employment whatsoever. So we can forget the concept, folks, that rising tides raise all boats. That is an illusion. The question we should be posing is whose tides and whose boats? Because I know for a fact, and this is taking place within our illustrious city, that we have built a dam for a number of individuals that live among us. So they're not getting any tides. There are no tides for these people. But our tides, in spite of everything, are certainly high enough. And without realizing that a conversation that I had originally intended to concentrate on the behavioral economic components tied to fear of missing out actually led me to a completely different direction. Out, FOMO. Out, out. In society's name. That's right, I break your power, FOMO. Loosen your hold on her mind. Go ahead, sister. Go ahead, sister. Move your head. That was easy. We can sit down now. So perhaps if I am able, if I can partake, if I can be so cheeky as to ask you together with me, and we'll make this a collective effort, I promise you, to take a step back and think about that concept, something to gain, something to lose. and pose the question, let's say on a number of levels. Let's perform this on a number of levels. The first one would be the most direct one, being the individual. In those things that we feel that we are afraid of losing, can we really determine the value? Because the fact is that if they have no value or limited value, then we're not really losing anything, are we? And for me personally, this is all about making a very conscious choice. And to the best of my ability, knowing why I make the certain decisions, and allowing for the sense of purpose to be reinforced continuously. In fact, that needs to be part of the model that we create for ourselves, that we understand why we can more easily identify the value, and we make this a very conscious process. So let's take that and raise it to the next level, to our community. In that community, for academic purposes, let's call the community that network that we belong to. And I'll take on the primary and the secondary stakeholders. Though that means those people that we don't know, but they're definitely part of our network. They very well could be some of those individuals that I described to you within that homeless shelter that are being exploited every day. Can we make a conscious decision within that network of value and loss? I'm firmly convinced we can. And once we have been able to master that second step, and I would even argue, after not thinking about this one in advance, but I would argue that you need to perform one before you can properly manage number two. Because if self-awareness is not there, then you're not able to manage the external. And then lastly, let's raise this one more notch, and let's look at our society taking in all of those different components that might not necessarily directly or indirectly fall within our network. And raising the question one more time, what are we losing? And what value does it have? And could you imagine, just close your eyes and join me on this journey. Could you imagine if we were all able to perform this exercise all at the same time and make a conscious decision, each and every one of us, to forego the ball and chain of FOMO, and using that as a vehicle in which we actually free ourselves. Yes, we free ourselves. And yes, we have whizzed through another 56 minutes, and I would like to thank you for allowing me to indulge one more time. And I look forward to joining you again next week. Thanks again.